Hey everyone, it is time for us to have a conversation. So, my name is Mav, and today we are going to talk a little bit about spiritual skepticism. Um, but I guess I'm gonna just do a couple of little introductory things for those of you who are gonna kind of like rewatch this. Um, yes, I will obviously be talking about a lot of stuff today. I don't know how long this is gonna be, because I do want to like go through a lot of content and hopefully like watch some videos with you all, um, answer questions, have conversations, and things like that as well. So if you're rewatching this, like you can totally like play the video at like double time speed or whatever, so that you can speed through it or anything like that. But and then some other notes is I have like a ton of notes today. Last week I had like an entire article that I published, but I haven't published one that I can like show you as I'm walking through all of the content today, which is obviously fine for me. It might be a little bit. Hopefully, it's still interesting to you guys during those periods, but we'll see kind of how that goes. I definitely encourage folks to interact, ask questions, and things like that as we move through the content because, yeah, I enjoy feedback so I can, see what other people are talking about. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so over the course of my life, I've had a pretty challenging relationship with science. From an early age, I was taught really conflicting information. My dad was an engineer and he really loved math and science. And I trusted the information that he would talk to me, or I trusted that the information that he would tell me would be like scientifically accurate, I guess. Um, I also knew that my dad was a really intelligent guy, and whenever I had questions about math or science, like he knew the answers. So I felt like it was a smart idea to trust my dad's, I guess, intelligence when it came to certain things about science. But the other thing was that like I didn't really account for the fact that my dad was really religious, and obviously everyone in my circle of influence was very religious. And in my personal experience, religion can sometimes keep you from understanding science and kind of like grasping scientific concepts. And then also, not just religion, also kind of like loosey goosey spiritual people can sometimes do this too. But I'll get into hopefully a lot of that as we move on. But yeah, so I was pretty scientifically ignorant for the majority of my life. And obviously, I'll tell more of my story later. And yeah, obviously, I spent a lot of time being skeptical. But in this video, I want to talk about kind of my process of going from like a skeptical person to now being a person who's like very much, I don't know, science is just important to me now. It's something that I feel like I rely on. The scientific process is something that I rely on. That doesn't mean that I trust all of things that are claimed to be backed by science. I'll obviously talk more about that later as well. All right, but I want to do a little introduction for the channel. My name is Mav, and this is Mav Magic, and on this channel, I like to talk about like spirituality, mental health, gender identity, whatever. Honestly, I feel like talking about. So that sounds good to you. Make sure you like and subscribe. And also, I'm just putting up some information right here on the scroll for places where you can contact me. And then also, if you're interested in supporting the channel, you can donate on Buy Me a Coffee. So yeah, that's pretty much my introductions here. And another thing that I want to mention is that obviously we're going to be having a conversation about science, but I'm not a scientist. Obviously, I don't know a lot about science. I know the things that I've researched myself, but I'm not a professional by any means. So I really encourage you to kind of look up the things that I am talking about and starting to do your own research as well. And then also like learning how to do research is another thing, but maybe I'll talk about that in a future video. All right. One of the first caveats that I want to make while we're having this conversation is that science isn't always like pretty, I guess, because I think there have been a lot of people that have been hurt by the scientific field in some ways. For example, like the development of nuclear weapons, like that was created by science. We know that like there was like weird in order for like American technology, I think a lot of military stuff, we definitely like worked with Nazis. Like a lot of questionable things have happened in the scientific field. Also, medical professionals do a lot of harm to patients. We see a lot of time the medical system and some other systems, even probably some technological advancing sciences, are really motivated by money. And when things are motivated by money, things can get messy. Yeah. And I feel another thing is that when things start to get run by money, things aren't really like pretty after that. When we start to kind of put money at the forefront of things, human like decency tends to kind of fall by the wayside. I think also for a lot of like, for me as like a Black person and other Black people, we know that definitely in like when the Nazis did a lot of their science about kind of judging the difference between races, there was a lot of harm that was done there. And so I understand that there are a ton of reasons why people would be skeptical about science, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing at all. Being skeptical about science is actually like a good thing. I think we should be skeptical of all ideas. And that's because I think sometimes people can say that they're using things like the scientific method when they're not. And if we can learn how to judge whether or not something is kind of appropriately following the scientific method, or if, you know, a large number of scientists or if the scientific community supports these claims, et cetera, yeah, we should be willing to kind of follow that scientific process ourselves. There are a lot of different reasons why people can be skeptical about science, but in this video, I'm really only going to be talking about the uh, religious reasonings, I guess. So there was a research study, and I might let me actually share this with you all so that you can read along. And here we go. Yeah, just so that you can read along. All right. So here we have this article here. Oh, wait, I need to make sure. Okay, it is being shared. Okay, so what makes people distrust science? I think people think that it's oftentimes politics, but it's oftentimes religion. So if we go down here and boop, they published a set of studies that investigated science trust and science skepticism. And I think towards the bottom, we see, I guess they wanted to look at the different variables to decide what makes a particular group more skeptical of science than other ones, or which ones are, I guess, more susceptible to religious skepticism. And okay. And I wish that I could find the point where they quoted this, because that's kind of the point of this. But the research did find that religion was kind of what indicated the most scientific mistrust. The other topics were political ideology, knowledge about science, and morality, like general morality. So with that understanding, with knowing that religious people are the most likely to be skeptical of science, that's pretty much like the whole reason why I'm making this video. We should be concerned. Spiritual and religious people should be concerned about this. Because a lot of things can go wrong when we mistrust science and kind of the scientific method. Sometimes, like I said before, we need to be skeptical of maybe, people's reasoning and things like that, or when people say that something is backed by science. And also when people just throw out there like, oh, this is backed by a scientific study, like ask more questions about that. Like, what kind of a study? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So, yeah, these are, this is just really tricky. And this is important for us to have a conversation about. If we're not actually, if we don't understand how to think critically and to process this kind of information, we're kind of in for a little bit of a mess. So, I want to talk about next kind of a couple of the different things that, or the different ways that I mistrusted science and kind of the beginning of my journey, I guess. So as I mentioned earlier, I was, I guess, like pretty skeptical of some science and stuff growing up. Like I was a young Earth creationist. I believed obviously that God kind of like created the entire universe out of nothing. Not necessarily that like, that the universe evolved or that like our planet was kind of created through kind of the process of maybe like, I don't know if it's called like galactic evolution. I don't know if that's even a thing, but just the process of, stars and planets being formed. Um, and yeah, I took the Bible literally. Miracles and all that stuff were literal, you know, defying the laws of physics, totally fine. So definitely a lot of magical thinking there. I was, however, more skeptical about other things, like, for example, like aliens. I was more like, I didn't really buy the evidence back then, and my beliefs changed as I got into other communities and stuff like that later on. But yeah, that's kind of how the process started. So it was interesting that there were some parts where I was actually more skeptical of some things that were a little bit like more nonsensical beliefs as a Christian, and then when I got into more like new agey spiritual beliefs, like a lot of that went out the window for a lot of reasons, and hopefully I'll get into some of those things today. But like I said, it's pretty problematic. And science is really what I realized is that in these communities is that science is really only important when it actually supports your worldview. And when it doesn't support your worldview, it's also important. It's also useful if you can manipulate the science or manipulate the research so that it fits your narrative. Um, Another one of the biggest reasons why I think that there's so many issues with not trusting science is that it actually leaves room for like more room for people to be living in like delusional realities or kind of like alternate realities. Um, because I know that believing that the world was created in an instant by like a deity it shapes and affects the way that I view the world very much, like everything about the world. And now that I believe more that that the world was created through kind of like a natural processes and things like that, that also has changed the way that I view the world and I view myself because I understand human evolution and we where we came from. That has changed the way that I perceive the world and kind of perceive that kind of information. So this stuff is important. um, and I think maybe some of the reasons why we have so many difficulties getting along is that we literally are living in different, really entirely different realities, which is kind of tricky, to get along with people if you're not living the same reality as them. If some people were to say like they were to kind of go against their beliefs and start trusting science more. One of the major concerns for them, I guess, in my assumption, would be that they would have to question their beliefs very significantly, obviously depending on what belief we're talking about here. One thing that I guess is common that I think about often is kind of like evidence for the existence of Jesus. Like even the evidence for that is like pretty questionable. And there are a lot of people who kind of landed on the idea that he never existed at all. He was just kind of a created character for people to kind of idolize. And if someone who was a Christian started kind of questioning that evidence, that would really shake up the way that they, looked at the world and believed about the world. So, all that to say is that trusting science, trusting the evidence is really scary. And I understand why people don't like to do it. And I understand why people avoid it and they don't do the actual research, and actually listen to it. Because I know what it's like to do research, like, and not be open, to do research in kind of like a closed off way, where I'm always kind of like discounting what the other people are saying and I'm not leaving room to kind of like take in new evidence. Um, But like I said, I didn't really even like know or understand how to do these things. And now I'm a little bit more, I would say I feel like I'm a little bit more educated. And I've been more willing. And I've like, honestly, I've had to humble myself a lot, because this is really hard to do, and really, really uncomfortable as well. Um, Alrighty. So we're going to get into kind of like the good stuff here right now. And we're going to start our conversation on like what happens when people mistrust science, and kind of the dangers of scientific mistrust. So let's start from the beginning. So if we don't trust science, we don't trust kind of what comes out of the scientific field. For example, like when evolutionary kind of science found out with like, I think, radiometric dating, how old certain materials on the planet were. If you're a young earth creationist, you can't, that does not fit with your understanding of how the world works. Unless you are the kind of Christian that, believes that God kind of created the Big Bang and then set evolution in motion, which is what some Christians believe, but not young earth creationists, of course. So if we're scientifically, if we don't understand these things, we don't trust the field. If the evidence that is coming out of the field threatens our belief system, we're probably not going to do a lot of research. So this leads to scientific illiteracy, I would say, and not just me, other people that I've heard when I've just, and I mean just when I've been doing my like YouTube research and doing stuff on Google and things like that. People talk about how like a lot of people are scientifically illiterate. I know that I guess I thought man, like you think that you're a lot more knowledgeable about science, like when when you're ignoring it, just because like I guess your surroundings, and you don't really want to admit how much you don't know. But I didn't know. I knew so little, and like right now, I'm realizing how little I actually, how little I knew. And I'm kind of at this place now where I'm really grateful, but I'm overwhelmed with the amount of information that I'm having to learn. Today, like just today, I learned and kind of integrated the fact that we don't like the concept of like a mitochondrial Eve like isn't real. Kind of like what would kind of prove the existence of kind of like an Adam and Eve type of thing. Like there were only two um, uh, common ancestors and not kind of like an entire species developed over time, which I think would make a lot more sense. And which is what science the evidence has kind of confirmed. Maybe if I changed the word science to evidence, people would be more open to the idea. But yeah. Oh, and the other thing that I feel like is important is like, oh shit. Dang it. This is what happens, y'all, when your camera is on a wobbly surface. Anyway, Um, I forget what I was saying. Anyway, so obviously I'm gonna move past that, and because my camera messed up, so whatever. Um, okay, so a lot of people don't understand the scientific process, and what also happens when they don't understand the scientific process is they don't have respect for scientists. Oh, I remember. I was going to define science, and when I talk about science, I just mean kind of like the people getting involved in the scientific method, testing hypotheses, making sure that claims are able to be falsifiable. Like if you have a claim that like an invisible alien exists, but like only on Tuesdays when you're looking at it and only you can see it and we can't prove it or test it, that is not falsifiable. So like we can't use a scientific method on that. So if anyone, you know what I'm saying, like that wouldn't be scientific if we were to kind of go into researching that claim. So we want to make sure. So when we're trusting science, we're trusting that the people are getting involved in good science, that the claims are actually falsifiable, and that they're testing a bunch of different theories. That like there's no bias involved. That the way that things are being tested is able to be replicated by other scientists. That the findings are agreed on by a vast number of scientists, by a collection of people who are doing this stuff. That's what I mean by science. And so, because I think like people are like, trust the science, and it's hard to understand because I know that there are people who claim to say things come from science when they're not. So it's hard to tell, and I understand that that can be confusing. But I hope that clarifies like what I'm talking about. All right, so okay. So specifically, like I said, we oftentimes can find that spiritual religious people won't trust scientific people for their expertise. They would rather trust themselves or kind of come up with alternate versions of science. For example, like young Earth creationists have kind of created like creation science, which is probably maybe a more legitimized form of pseudoscience, because like evidence hasn't shown that the earth was created. I hope that makes sense. But I think that we would go, if I wanted to get my car fixed, I would go to a mechanic, not a baker. I just think that that's pretty obvious. I want to go to the person who I know is going to do a good job. And the creation scientist is probably not going to do the best job with like accurately dating materials through like the actual process, because they don't trust in carbon dating or radiometric dating. And also, if I'm using these terms incorrectly, it's because I'm a beginner at this stuff. I wasn't taught this stuff in school. I was raised in a Christian school, and our science was very limited. Okay, so the other thing is a lot of times spiritual and religious people will trust their own intuition, or kind of like the voice of God, which is kind of just like yourself. But that's a whole nother conversation. They start to kind of trust their own judgment or kind of God rather than actual evidence. And then also, it's really important that when you're dealing with anything intuitive, you also try to look for actual evidence information. There are things that intuition is really good for. If I'm working on a creative art project and I go with intuitively led colors, that's amazing, right? But if I go like choose intuitively right or left when I'm trying to get to somewhere specific, that's not going to help me very much. I hope that makes sense. Okay, and then the other issue specifically that I wanted to mention is that people don't understand the basics of the origins of the planet or the origins of humans as a species. We don't understand human intelligence. We don't understand the kind of like amazing capacity for human beings to have these magical experiences through biological means. We believe that like if we believe that we are either created by God, we are a species that has been manipulated by aliens, like, or we have literally been transplanted from another planet. And all of these are theories that I've heard, by the way. if we don't agree on where we came from, that impacts the way that we view each other, that impacts the way that we view the world. It leaves room for people to say all kinds of stuff, that people are lizard people, that people, some people are like soulless individuals. There's all of these things that can come when people don't agree on how the earth was created in the first place. Okay, so that's pretty much the whole topic of scientific illiteracy. Now I'm moving on to medical mistrust. This is a topic all on its own, and what I want to do is maybe I'll just share. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to share all of this, because I have a lot of content that I want to get through, and I might just actually share it this way so that you guys can see all the videos. And I figured out why the videos weren't working last week, and this week it should be working, because I watched that section and it was terribly awkward because it just was me sitting in silence while the videos were playing. I think I linked the videos in the bottom though, so you can watch them on your own. For this video, I didn't do any place where I linked all these videos, but the titles are going to be obviously here in the videos. Here we go. So I have a bunch of notes, and so I'm going to kind of share my notes page and hope that I can. Okay. All right. We're going to get started here. Give me one moment so we can get this thing going. Okay, I'm not actually sure. Oh, now I see. Okay. Okay, this is the one that's sharing. So we're going to watch a couple of videos together. Like I said, anti-vax. We have some other stuff coming up. Maybe I'll make this bigger so I don't give away too many spoilers for what's coming next. But here's this.
Get your COVID vaccination.
They want to up.
They're sharing false rumors and lies about COVID-19.
If someone's watching,
Find out enslavement.
let me know if you can hear the content.
And they have influence. Because
I'm going to pause it. Just make sure. Let me know if you can hear the content. It should be working, but I want to get a confirmation also.
they're religious leaders.
I look at anti-vaccine content all day, every day. My name is Kalina Koltai. So these figureheads who have a large platform, ties, are often respected, and they also have the cultural competency to understand what is important, what are the views, what is necessary to make it powerful and resonate.
It's a minority spreading these false messages. Most leaders in every faith are trying to do the opposite.
The vaccine is a gift of hope.
But when religious leaders spread
Right.
wrong information about vaccines, it can be powerful.
So basically, this whole video is talking about how like truly dangerous it can be when like religious leaders start kind of touting a lot of this information. If you heard in the very beginning, this one guy talked about making sure you got your chip. I'm gonna play a couple of the clips of the people talking themselves, so you can hear like the kind of rhetoric that people use. And this happens when like you're mistrusting of evidence. This kind of the whole hypothesis that I'm trying to share here. Okay, let's see.
In Israel, a rabbi claims the vaccine will make you gay, which is nonsensical.
All those claiming to be saved.
And in the US, some evangelical Christians are debating whether vaccines are the mark of the beast, a sign of the devil, and the end of times.
Take the mark of
Okay. And that when the pandemic first started, and I kind of noticed how things were getting pretty religious in terms of like the ways that people were kind of like arguing with each other. I remember talking to my wife and telling her, I know that these mofos are going to start coming out here with some mark of the beast shit. I promise you that that's going to happen. And lo and behold, it happened. People just believe that people, yeah, when you're looking for the end times, when your glory comes, when the entire earth falls apart, like you're looking for any reason, any way that you can connect the dots to your ideology, your insane ideology. I hold back using these kinds of words because I would have felt really offended if I heard somebody talking about my beliefs like that. But I just can't. I can't not be open. I can't not like say how frustrating these things are. These things really, really, truly are. Not just frustrating, kind of angering, actually. I'm gonna put this down for a little bit because I want to switch things up a little bit here. And I also want to stop sharing and share it again so that I can make sure that I'm sharing this properly. And I might actually do things a little bit differently so I don't show so many of my videos ahead of time. So yeah, I don't want to show too much more of that video specifically, mostly because, meh, you know, it's just I don't know. I don't really feel like it. But the next one that I wanted to quickly throw up here is another video. It's about sex ed. So not only do we have like vaccine misinformation, and we also have misinformation about other topics like sex and things like that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention about kind of vaccine misinformation is the fact that it's really upsetting, honestly, because like oftentimes young people will oftentimes die because their parents don't get them vaccinated for religious reasons. I think that obviously there are some situations where, excuse me, getting a vaccine isn't going to be the best choice for a specific person. Absolutely, I think that that's true. But if we share the fact that this is like factually what's going on, I think that that's problematic and concerning. And I really don't think that that should be, seen as crazy or anything. Okay, so good. Make sure that I had this audio being shared, and so this should be good on your end. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about sex ed. And this is a cute little silly video. I think it's, we're not obviously going to watch the whole thing. We're going to watch just hopefully some of it. So let's just obviously watch. I want you to just watch the actual video parts. And this person did say that the audio for this video only comes through one headphone, so the audio might be weird on this. So let's hope I'll kind of cap what's going on in case the sound doesn't work. Okay, it's muted.
Watching our movie, and that's how a baby gets in there. Where do babies come from? Okay, I just want you to put that in your brain. Remember that title.
Zan and Jeremy are curious about a lot of things, just like you. Suzanne and Jeremy are part of a family. There are all kinds of families, but God's plan for every family is the same.
There are all kinds of families. They do all happen to be in this photo straight, relatively light-skinned, and have children, but trust us, there are all kinds of families.
To care for and forgive and love one another the way he loved us when he sent his son Jesus to be our Savior. Every member of every family adds more love to the family, and families are always growing up. The grown-ups grow older, the babies grow big. Sometimes children even grow bigger than their parents.
As a 5'2" person raising offspring
Miracle of birth.
Okay, here we go.
The display showed many wonderful things.
Oh, look how tiny that baby is. I've never seen a baby that little. That's really how big a baby is after 2 months. It's about as big as your daddy's thumb. When a baby is that tiny, it can't eat or even breathe for
2 months is 8 weeks. No, that would be relatively large. A fetus at 8 weeks is more like the size of a gummy bear, which is about 2 centimeters, and definitely not as big as a thumb.
There's a little bit of
putting it out
fact
there.
checking
That
for
would,
you all
that would
there.
be not the right size.
It lives inside its mother's body in a special place God made for a baby to grow. It is called a uterus. While the baby grows, the uterus stretches just like a balloon, bigger and bigger. Here's a baby when it's a little bigger. The baby still can't eat or breathe for itself, but one of God's miracles is that it doesn't have to. See that cord going from the baby's tummy to the side of the uterus? Food and air come to the baby from the mother, and wastes from the baby also move through that tube to the mother.
Was I ever that little that I couldn't breathe?
You sure were. Even your mother and I were that small once. Do you know where the cord joined your body?
At your belly button.
Another name for that is navel, Jeremy.
Look,
Okay, and then moving
See more of the parts. Look, the penis and the scrotum.
boys and girls really are different.
Maybe they're going to do it here. They've got to do it here, right?
Yes, but there are also many ways in which boys and girls are the same. They can both grow and think and feel and love.
It's interesting that God planned for just about the same number of boys and girls to be born. Both are important to him. It takes about 9 months for a baby to grow large enough to be born.
And how the baby started is another of God's miracles. You know that when a man and woman love each other and decide to get married and spend the rest of their life together, they show their love in many ways.
I know, hugging and kissing and stuff.
Right. Maybe we can explain it a little more clearly.
When a boy becomes a man, many changes take place. But one of the most important is this, Jeremy. In the scrotum, the bag of skin that hangs behind the penis, are the testicles. The testicles of a man make millions of tiny cells called sperm.
And when girls become, in these little organs called ovaries, a little cell called an ovum is released every so often.
They just went through sperm and eggs and all of that, and they actually showed pictures of testicles and a penis. They're going to explain that. They're going to do it.
God is happy when two people decide to get married and start their life together with his blessing.
He made a husband and wife for living together and showing their love to each other all their life. At very special times, they like to hold each other close. God made their bodies so they fit together in a wonderful way.
At one of those special love times, the sperm from the man's body can go into the woman's body.
Sperm and an ovum in the body. That is when a new baby begins.
So obviously she's gonna cut in here and just talk about how, like, they didn't mention the fact that, like, you know, you have to kind of like do the whole sex part to have the sperm and the uterus like come together or whatever. So like obviously this is pretty problematic. I'm pretty sure that this is, you know, the rest of it is pretty much the same, a bunch of the same stuff, over and over and over again. You know, like, when you don't like talk about sex like in an open way, and when you like also there's also like a little bit of misinformation here, and I think that that's important because I think when spiritual people or like religious people specifically in this situation talk about like new or babies in utero being a different size and they actually are at a certain time, like I think that they all like the leaning that they're going for is kind of a whole like, you know, anti-abortion situation type of a thing. The other thing is that like when you don't understand like communicating to other people, the fact that like the birth process isn't just like a magical thing. It's not just like God is magically giving the couple a baby. When you don't understand that, you leave a whole bunch of room for misinformation. So for example, I grew up and I don't know how long it took me to kind of understand this thing. But I thought that babies just like came like when you went to the altar and like you kissed someone, that was when like the baby was like inserted or something like that. And you know what I mean? I was really confused later on when I found out there was like someone in my family who was like, they were having trouble getting pregnant. I was so confused. I was like, they were married and they kissed at the altar, so they definitely should be pregnant. I didn't understand those things. And then also, you know, it may be you know, maybe even important to mention the fact that, you know, we might even be leaving room for things like the immaculate conception, you know, that whole thing, when we don't understand what's going on in terms of you know, the medical field or whatever. And this next topic that I'm going to talk about is pretty upsetting, I would say. I got really angry and upset when I was watching this video. And yeah, so yeah, I just kind of want to remind people that this is tough stuff to watch and to deal with. It's not like no real, I guess they're just like, nothing's being shown here, but sorry about that. So what we're dealing with here, what I'm going to be showing you a couple of videos or a couple of clips of, are different families who choose to mistrust, I guess, scientific evidence and believe different things about even illness and sickness, and then they choose not to get treatment for either themselves or for their children, and then, you know, people end up dying. That's upsetting to me, like really upsetting. I think that, you know, these beliefs are all well and good. If you don't want to get treatment for something, go ahead, go for it. But please get your kids help when they need help. Yeah. So we're gonna check some of these out. And remember, if you have questions or anything, feel free to.
Seth Welch's Tatiana in tears as the couple sat by side of arraignment today.
You're both charged with what they call felony murder.
In court documents, detectives say the couple told them they were aware of their daughter's skinny appearance and low weight for at least a month. The wife told detectives they did not get medical help over fear of CPS taking away their 3 kids, over distrust of medicine, and because of religious beliefs. All have been topics of some of her husband's rambling videos on Facebook. On doctors.
They're priesthoods of the medical cult.
On vaccines.
The righteous shall live by faith. It's God who's sovereign over disease and those sorts of things, and of course ultimately death. So it didn't seem smart to me that you would be saving people who weren't the fittest. If evolution believes in survival of the fittest, well, then why are we vaccinating everybody? Shouldn't we just let the weak die off and let the strong survive?
An autopsy found the baby died of malnutrition and dehydration.
I think another thing that I want to mention here, so there's a couple of things that were said. Obviously, like, so I'll touch on this later in the video, and it's good that I heard him say this, but he said the science cult, I think, or like the medicine cult he mentioned. That is a really common thing. A lot of spiritual and religious people will say that, like, you know, science is dogmatic. Science is like the religion of science. It's very interesting the way that they will say that. And I think also understanding evolution as kind of like, you know, not necessarily like survival of the fittest, like only the strong will survive. Like, if you look at, there's some animals that are surviving that like are maybe like not that, you know, impressive, but they've survived just because they've had kind of like lucky genes. And it's more about kind of like, you know, entire species are kind of like slowly mutating and not necessarily just the strong will survive. So that also displays the fact that he doesn't actually understand evolution with just that statement. And this is another one. This one was the one that really upset me particularly. So let's check it out. Let's be upset again.
Herbert and Catherine Scheibel are charged with third-degree murder following the death of their 8-month-old son, Brandon, this spring.
Instead of caring and nurturing him, they ultimately caused his death by praying over his body instead of taking him to the doctor.
And unbelievably, this isn't the first time this has happened to the Scheibels. In 2009, their 2-year-old son, Kent, died. The parents did not seek medical care to treat him.
I tried the previous case 2.5 years ago, and the circumstances to that case to this case are eerily similar.
In the first case, the Scheibels were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Kent. The prosecutor asked for prison time, but the judge instead opted for probation and allowed the couple to move back to their home with their 7 other children. The judge did order them to seek medical care for their children in the future.
I was upset at that, and I was upset because I felt that they just didn't get it, and they weren't going to get it. And now here we are, standing here again 2.5 years later. Another one of their children is dead, and they still don't get it.
Winona Rossiter broke down as she and her attorneys asked for legal.
So, like, also, y'all, right? So we just watched 2 of those clips. There are, this is like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 11 different stories here. Even like this guy, I want people to hear this guy because this one's really ridiculous.
I also succumbed to pneumonia. Mother was holding him on her lap when he died. His name.
A kid dies of pneumonia, like very treatable, oftentimes very treatable if you catch it early.
Was Rocky.
What I will talk to you about is the law.
Okay.
I would like to remind you that this country was founded on religious freedom and on freedom in general. Freedom is freedom. Whenever you try to restrict one person or another in any fashion, then you're chipping away at freedom. Yours and mine.
Yep. You think your son had freedom of choice?
That's not a question I'm going to go into. I told you I'd talk about freedom.
Of the 553 marked graves, the piece.
Freedom, everyone. It's all about freedom. This is not, like I said, this is not fun, right? And a lot of times people say things like, oh, well, religious beliefs, they're fine. They're not hurting anybody with these beliefs. If they just want to believe, whatever thing, that should be fine for them. But obviously people are getting hurt. Like, a lot of people are really getting hurt. I think that we might have to do something different here. We can't just keep letting this continue. Our government enables this. Our government likes apparently that people just let other people die, and I think it was really upsetting, especially the fact that the family was like allowed to have their child, back under their care again, and they did the same thing. It's disturbing, in my opinion, disturbing at the very least. Another thing that I really want to mention very specifically is that sometimes people just don't understand disease. When I was like deep into some of my weirder spiritual beliefs, there was one book that I was reading. This woman talked about how like germs don't create sickness. It's actually like essentially very similar to the language of like it's your vibration that like attracts sickness or something like that. And that's kind of what we're going to get into next. But real quick, I just want to make sure. Sorry about this awkward position that I just put you all in, but I just needed to make sure my camera was still good. Okay, so we're good, by the way. All right, so the other thing is that oftentimes, spiritual religious people will not really understand disease, and they might harm themselves actually in the process of kind of like trying to become more spiritual. And so some spiritual folks will connect all of their health issues to spiritual causes, and will therefore only seek out alternative care for themselves, which can lead to more damage. Oftentimes people, when they kind of go into spiritual, they have their spiritual awakening, they will, for example, go on like really strict low calorie diets or vegan diets that people claim raise their vibration or something like that. And people have reported getting sick from this, going on low calorie raw diets. Might be, maybe beneficial for a short period of time, excuse me, but for really long periods of time, it's not always good, I would say, for every person. I can't say that there aren't people who find benefit with this system, but overall, that's just my opinion. I was a vegan for a while, not for spiritual reasons, but yeah, it was, and it's also just tough. It's tough to do it too for like financial reasons and accessibility reasons and things like that. I could do it again maybe, but I don't really feel like that's okay. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna check out more of like the spiritual realm of things. So obviously I've been kind of talking about, this has been more evangelical in perspective, and now I'm going to share something from this one, I would say, spiritual, guru types. I have a lot of opinions about this person. And I remember even when I was like first learning about a lot of this law of attraction stuff, I even thought that she was a little bit maybe untrustworthy. But, to each their own. Everyone can make their own decisions about whether or not they believe these people. So this is obviously Andrea Schulman. I don't obviously like want anyone to go and like drag these people by any means. I want personally to just talk about their ideas, and kind of talk about maybe why some of them might be problematic. Okay.
My goodness, it was craziness. It was absolute craziness. And knowing what I know now about the law of attraction, if something like that happens, I always kind of want to ask myself, okay, what was going on up here?
All right, so we're gonna give that a second. we're gonna give that a second to load, and then when it comes back, I'll give it just another second. And I believe in this story, basically, I think that like she talks about getting a cold or something like that, or getting hurt, and let me. I think that she might say most of it. No, I'm going to stay because I don't want to watch too much of this video again.
And knowing what I know now about the law of attraction, if something like that happens, I always ask myself, okay, what was going on up here that projected that into my body? And for me, it was really pretty.
Darn it. So she basically is kind of like, she's talking about whenever something bad happens to her, she feels like it's important for her to like look inwards and ask herself like what I might have been thinking in order to manifest that into her life. Like what did she say that or what did she say or think that caused this type of thing to happen to her? I'm gonna check to see if it'll let me finish this, but
Pretty obvious, because the 4th of May was the new moon. And I don't think I've talked about this on this channel. Maybe I have. I don't think I have. But one of the things that I like to do is when the new moon comes, I like to set a few intentions for my work. So the work that I do here, some new projects or some fun little things that I want to do. And so I'll just set the intention on the new moon and kind of begin working on it. And by the time the moon cycle is complete, I usually have something really cool. Well, this month I'm moving, and I've talked about this before on my channel, but I have got a whole house to pack up. I got a lot going on. And when I sat down to write my new moon intentions, and I was thinking about them a few days before the new moon, one of the passing thoughts that was in my head was, well, you're kind of busy to be taking on these projects. But I'm like, it's okay. I always do it for business. I'm always going to do it. So what happened? That fear, that little latent worry that I was going to be overstressed, it was going to be too much work, symbolically came out in a particular disease. What kind of disease? A disease that completely debilitated my ability to work. And so that's something to really understand is you want to think about your disease. What does it represent to you?
Okay, so there's so much to unpack here. It's crazy. So this person, so basically she's saying that she, like I said earlier in the video, I didn't want to watch the whole thing. Early in the video, she mentioned, I think, getting some type of cold or sore throat or something like that. And, you know, when this happened, she's like, oh no, why am I sick? What's wrong? I have some type of sickness. And then she goes back in her head and she's like, oh, you know, a couple of days ago during the new moon, I tried to set an intention, but then I, you know, second guessed myself and had fear. And that fear was what caused me to get sick. Okay. So, I hope that just by me saying that out loud that you hear the issue there. That's basically saying, like, anytime a person gets sick, that they did something wrong, right? They made some type of they put themselves in a bad situation, and that's why they got sick. And another thing that I want to, that is probably one of the more important things to understand, is that she basically says that that being in fear is unhealthy, right? Being in this, like she said, she was in that vibration of fear, and that was the reason why she got sick. So essentially, if she hadn't gotten in that vibration of fear, she would have never gotten sick, right? So the logic is you keep your vibration high, you have positive emotions all the time, you stay healthy. It's just not logical. It just doesn't happen. There are spiritual teachers, there are mediums, there are channelers who die of horrific diseases all the time. There are people who die suddenly, and then the groups, they'll say stuff like, oh, you know, well, they chose in their soul to go, you know, back into the collective consciousness. They'll say stuff like that because that's what they want to believe. It's the narrative that they already have in their head. And you're just, by that point, you're probably so kind of like committed to your alternate reality that you'll say anything, say or do anything. But that, yeah, the other thing, okay, she was also about to say, like, the assumption here is basically she's saying, look at your illness, see what that illness represents, and then you'll understand more about, you know, your spiritual sickness. So let me show, like, let's pretend she had strep throat. Okay. So what people would do is they would Google something like, the spiritual cause of a sore throat. And here, I'm going to share it back with you. I'm obviously, my spelling isn't the best, but okay. So energetic wisdom has probably all the different types. I've definitely been on this website before, and y'all, like, I know how to do this stuff because I did this stuff all the time. When I got sick, I would try to look up like what was going on with me spiritually so that I could help myself heal. And the thing is, if you, like, when you get sick, if you kind of like reflect, you'll definitely find something. You'll find something that's like, oh man, you know, if I would have maybe given myself a little bit more rest, I might not be sick right now, or something like that. And sorry about all these freaking cookies. Okay. So this is just the spiritual cause of throat problems. So I'm not really going to read all of this stuff. I'm just showing you basically like that this kind of stuff exists, that these are kind of the types of things that people will do. So instead of saying like, what, you know, medical treatment can I get? Like that can help me treat the symptoms of this thing. People will be like, what energy in my body is off balance that caused this sickness or illness? And I really want to make it very clear. I very much believe that emotional things can be a direct or indirect cause of physical sickness, even very severe autoimmune diseases and stuff like that. The amount of people with autoimmune diseases and like intense sicknesses and stuff like that, and the relation to like childhood trauma, in my assumption, and from the last time that I heard, and I could be wrong, there is a high correlation of those types of things. But you know what I mean? Like it's not correlation causing causation. These things, sometimes people just get sick. But I also think that sometimes if someone has had trauma and they haven't really dealt with it for a long period of time, you know, they can sometimes get really sick because of it, because they bury it really deep inside. And when you bury stuff really deep down, I think that you're susceptible to getting sick. So if you have a sore throat, this could be because you're not speaking up for yourself. You're swallowing your anger. You have stifled creativity or refusal to change, right? But these things are great, right? If you're feeling that you're having trouble with these things, and then you start maybe doing some spiritual work to be more open and share your thoughts more, that's great. But if you walk around believing that if you start to think differently about your throat, that like your throat's going to feel better or something like that, like it's just not like, it doesn't always work that way. For example, I've had times in my life where I've been like in a really positive mental space and I've gotten sick. And other times where I've been in negative spaces and like good things have happened in my life. So I'm not saying that the law, like that there are, maybe I am saying, I am saying the law of attraction is bullshit, everyone. I am saying it. Usually I like to pad my words a lot. This is this guy, he has like a bunch of stuff. This is pretty much all he does. He's a soul whisperer. All these people, this is a lot of the stuff that they do. And I know, like I said in my last video, like a year ago, I would have been jealous. I was jealous of this dude. I was like, I want to be soul whisperer. Like that seems awesome. And like it comes from a place of like, I desperately wanted to help people. Like I wanted to be good at helping people. So people will believe things about themselves, that they have magical abilities to like read your soul and to figure out what's wrong with you. I'm not saying that these people aren't skilled. They might be skilled helpers or whatever, but maybe they don't have, you know, training, like medical training, or what was I gonna say? The one thing that's important about licensure is the accountability that comes with licensure. That's really important. When people aren't accountable to any systems, like there isn't like a soul whisperer board, right? Where if a soul whisperer harms you in some way with their methods, that you can complain and say like, hey, this guy scammed me, right? You can't do that with this kind of stuff. So it's tricky. This is not me saying that all of this is bad. You know, I offer, you know, coaching services or whatever, right? Like, so I'm not saying that offering services is a bad thing. I just think that it's people's guts to be cautious about it. So yeah, it's fun stuff. It's fun stuff when you when you blame yourself for everything. It's also really exhausting, y'all. It's really exhausting. Every time something wrong happens, you're like looking inward, like why, you know, like what happened, like what did I do? And especially with me, I personally like when it comes to spiritual stuff, like I go deep and I am very good at believing things. I heard someone else say that like one thing that they got from their like Christian upbringing was like the skill of belief, like learning how to believe things really well. And I'm really good at that, right? If I take it as a positive. And I'm learning how to do that, but that's a whole nother a whole nother thing I'm talking about. Also, enjoy these little, you'll probably see me peeking around with my little stim toys, because otherwise I'll go crazy while I'm sitting here talking to you. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of things that are issues, and I think that we need to be able to talk about these things importantly. And I don't remember where I was going with that. Yeah, so that's problematic. And so also, like, any type of that consciousness stuff can get really dicey. Like I said, I love spirituality just as much as the next guy, but you really have to be very skeptical. Another thing with this mood, feeling good stuff, like the toxic positivity type, law of attraction type ideology. You have to be very, very yeah, you have to kind of like admit a lot of problematic stuff. And the deeper you go into it, the more problematic it gets. And the next thing that I want to get into is kind of like the issues in the spiritual community with mental health. And what I want to talk to you about is like specifically more intense things, like people who have visual, audio, maybe even tactile hallucinations and things like that. These people are oftentimes, I would even maybe say, exploited by the spiritual community. Yeah, I would probably say that would be fair. It'd be exploited. Some people believe a lot of things that are harmful to others, and I'm going to show you a really good example of that right now. So this is a video, in my opinion, from all of the research that I've done about spirituality and schizophrenia from when I was in the community and now that I'm out of it or whatever. I think that this perspective seems to kind of well grasp or cover the kinds of beliefs that I'm talking about here.
Perspective. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder characterized by paranoid thoughts, delusions, and hallucinations that make it difficult for the person to discern between what is real and what isn't. While the causes are mostly unknown, some suggest it is related to genetics and environmental factors. For instance, people are more likely to develop schizophrenia if they have a parent or sibling with the condition. Additionally, childhood trauma and abuse can bring about symptoms of schizophrenia. Even low vitamin D levels in newborns has been linked to.
Okay, so she obviously here is talking about the scientifically agreed on reasons and causes and stuff for it. Okay, and then after that, like, she just jumps away, like she just flies off the handle, so to speak. She just kind of like starts making I think that she just kind of starts talking out of her ass a little bit.
Spiritual component that is overlooked. As we discussed in mental illness is a spiritual experience, treating the physical symptoms doesn't address the root cause and thus will not effectively. All other mental disorders has a spiritual component that is overlooked. As we discussed aspects of mental illness and operate strictly from the physical realm where physical causes and symptoms are the only means a condition can form. However, schizophrenia, like all other mental disorders, has a spiritual component that is overlooked. As we discussed in mental illness is a spiritual experience, treating the physical symptoms doesn't address the root cause and thus will not effectively get to the root of the issue.
So those kinds of things where they say like only treating the physical symptoms of depression, like only giving a person medication won't help the person like fully heal. I agree. You have to do like deep trauma, treatment and stuff like that to help these people. So there are some of the things that she's talking about that's accurate. But necessarily and also getting people spiritual help doesn't always look like actually getting involved in some type of like spiritual path. I think that spiritual healing can also just look like you dealing with your own shit. And that can be your spiritual path. Honestly, you don't have to do anything mystical to be a spiritual person, in my opinion.
The root issue of schizophrenia can directly be linked to physical causes. Does that mean that the spiritual causes should be dismissed, or vice versa? No, because everything that has a physical existence also has a non-physical existence, and thus are directly connected to one another.
What? everything with a physical existence also has a non-physical existence. Like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where the evidence is for that. If you mean that like there are non-visible energies that we can test, like yeah, like we can't necessarily see sound waves or light waves all the time. Maybe that's the invisible that you're talking about. But if you mean invisible in terms of like flying entities, then I've lost you.
Duality is the core principle of life. There doesn't exist one thing if the opposite also doesn't exist. There cannot exist positivity without negativity, and there cannot exist negativity without positivity. This is the same as the physical cannot exist without the non-physical. The non-physical and the physical both exist and depend on one another. The non-physical wouldn't exist without the physical, and the physical wouldn't exist without the non-physical. With this knowledge, we must then take the physical approach to schizophrenia and extend it to the
non-physical. So I don't know about you, but I was very confused when I watched this video the first time. I really had no idea what was going on. So I want to see, there's a part where she'll say the thing.
Feelings of being watched could not only be a reality of physical surveillance, but also one
here it goes.
Schizophrenia, and extend it to the non-physical to understand the other set of causes. The symptoms of schizophrenia, such as paranoid thoughts and feelings of being watched, could not only be a reality of physical surveillance, but also one of spirits over the person. When the physical body of a living creature ceases to function, the spirit of the once living creature will either merge with the collective unconscious or reject it.
Can I have a site, like a source for that? What is this entity? Like, what is the consciousness that's leaving your body? What is the collective consciousness? Is that like something that we can look at, like, or test or prove or disprove? I don't think so. So therefore, it's like an unfalsifiable claim, like we talked about in the early stages of this video.
Those who reject the world and the collective unconscious often remain as non-physical domain entities, often what we consider spirits or ghosts. Some individuals, such as those with schizophrenia, can sense these entities around them and fear their existence because all living creatures fear the unknown and their own inevitable death. All living creatures fear their own death because we operate from this physical domain and cannot perceive the non-physical domain. Due to this fear of the unknown, those with schizophrenia perceive a reality that others cannot, the non-physical domain being perceived by the individual through a physical medium. Additionally, these spirits who reject the world could influence the emotional state of an individual with a mental condition, bringing their vibration down and making them more susceptible to outside forces. Those with schizophrenia also have hallucinations of people, objects, and events and scenarios reenacted before their very eyes that others cannot see. While others cannot see what is physically going on, the person with schizophrenia can see perfectly clearly. What they could be seeing is spirits around them or past events linked with those spirits or the environment. They may even have a sense that something is about to happen, but be unable to identify it. It is not uncommon for some people with schizophrenia to have psychic abilities. Nevertheless, a spiritual phenomenon is occurring.
Okay, and then, okay, next, you can even see
the spiritual door for this person is far too open, and excess energy from the non-physical domain is entering their physical domain existence, just like those who have the spiritual door completely closed. The person with schizophrenia has the door far too open.
Okay, so, like, okay, so there is a lot of stuff that was brought up here that are like a ton of different claims, like, in order for you to agree with everything in this video, like you have to believe in ghosts, you have to believe in like an actual soul that's like an actual thing that leaves our body after we die, that kind of animates us. And also like schizophrenic people, apparently they just have a very thin veil. The door is too far open, and so they're just getting an excess of spiritual material inundated into their head. You know, that is like, once again, can I have a citation? That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking for is just a little citation for where the stuff is coming from. Another thing that's important to say is that spiritual people love to plagiarize. I am guilty of it 100%. Love to plagiarize stuff. They just say things, they don't say where they come from. What I'm trying to do here, right, is like show you my sources as I'm doing stuff, as I'm learning. So I hope that like you also can do this stuff as well. You guys can do your own research and learn things on your own. We're gonna watch another video that kind of shows Another reason why this is super problematic. Or basically what I want to show you is, oh goodness gracious, gumdrops. This might, I need to make sure this doesn't play again. Sorry, friends. I appreciate all of your patience with me as I learn how to do live streams as well. So you all just had to see that. That was a great thing that we all had to see. I hope that this is the right video.
Do you love Gantt charts? Here's how easily you can build one.
You don't get free ads. This is not the right video. It's the wrong video. Y'all, I apologize. The only thing about this stuff is that I can't, edit it. Usually I would edit out all of this stuff if I was doing some like a real video or something. But let's try this again one more time. I think this one should be the right one now. So we're going to talk a little bit. Let's see and make sure this is the right video. Yes. Okay.
So whenever I publish a video about hallucinations, inevitably there'll be some people who reach out and say, it's clear that they're seeing spirits and they need to go see this witch doctor.
Oh.
And can you talk about why that's problematic?
That is incredibly problematic because that's enabling behavior. Experiencing these hallucinations, it's not normal brain chemistry. I mean, some people will see it as an act of God, and if that's what you want to believe and that's what you feel is prudent to your own situation, that's fine. But to tell other people what to do with their own bodies and what to do with their health, I mean, that's only something a doctor should be doing. I had a teacher who she believed that I was seeing spirits, and that perpetuated a nasty notion that I was seeing spirits instead of hallucinations.
Did she actually vocalize that to you?
She did.
And that made you believe it?
Yes.
And what happened from there?
I could have gotten treatment had she noticed the signs. Had she been educated on schizophrenia, I could have gotten treatment a lot sooner and my life would be a lot different.
When did you first?
So therein lies one of the huge issues here, y'all. Like, if we don't understand what's going on with mental health, if we don't tell people to get help when they're hearing voices or whatever, we need to do better. We need to do better. And as a mental health professional, I actually have a really tricky time with understanding exactly what to do, because I think people hold on to their beliefs pretty preciously. So if they talk to me about having a premonition or something, it's a lot for me to say something like, that's ridiculous, like that you're believing that have a premonition or whatever. And because I think that sometimes people do have dreams that happen. It's a thing that actually happens for people, obviously. But doesn't mean that every dream we have is going to be a premonition or whatever. So we just need to make sure that these people are they remain grounded with their beliefs and help and actually understand that these things are hallucinations. That, like, the only thing that I could agree with is if a person was saying, that maybe these hallucinations are, they're all obviously coming from your own consciousness, but maybe there might be something that they're trying to communicate with you. It's your own psyche trying to communicate with you, not demons or ghosts. It's your own psyche. That's what ghosts, in my understanding, that's what ghosts are. They are projections of our own minds. We can make ourselves feel like there's something in the room. There are other things that I'm not sure about, such as like things flying across the room. I don't know about things like that, and I'm okay with not having all the answers. But I'm not going to claim that I know something. That's for sure. And then I think that this might be the last thing that I want to review today. Like, no, nah. I think, okay, let me get through the rest of this information so that I don't have to like come back and make a whole nother video about this. I'm going to skip that video. There was another video that I was going to show basically about this woman who believed that her mental health was, or her mental illness was a demon. And there was this a video of this pastor who was saying that he prayed the demon out of her. And that she had this, you know, incredible moment where she kind of had this really dramatic release. And that's great. Cathartic releases are really useful, and it can definitely induce the placebo effect, or it can be used, or is basically a good example of the placebo effect. It doesn't mean that demons are the cause of mental illness, right? I feel like we would have thought that was a pretty archaic understanding, of a pretty archaic understanding of mental illness, but clearly it's a very modern belief as well. The other one another story, yeah, I think that I might actually do 2 parts of this, mostly because I'm tired of talking. And I do want to kind of share a good amount of information about like, I think, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit more research this week and have some more content to show you guys. We're going to talk more next time. We're going to talk more about things such as like faith healing, things like quantum mysticism, alternate history, aliens. We're going to get into all of that, as well as talk a little bit about why science is actually important. Like I said, who knows what we will get through. And I'm glad that we were able to have such a long conversation today. Because yeah, we got through quite a bit of stuff, but there's just a lot more here than I guess I anticipated. Once again, I really hope that these videos were able to work and play through. Otherwise, this would have been awkward again. But no one let me know that they weren't playing, so I'm hoping that we did have some good things coming out. I really appreciate you all being here and supporting the channel. If you made it out to the end here. Let me know if you have any other thoughts about other ideas of things you want me to look up and research. Wow, sorry about all these hiccups. I basically want to take you guys through the process of what it looks like to learn about evolution and to learn about science and to realize that a lot of the stuff you believed was wrong, and being honest with yourself. So however that needs to happen, I'm willing to work and make it happen. So thank you so much for sticking around and watching this video with me. We'll be back next week with some more awesome information. And that's pretty much it, y'all. Peace and love. I will see you next time. Have a fantastic and wonderful and amazing day.